Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Chaotic Entertainment. I'm your host, Dan, and today I'll be reviewing Core Keeper, an indie early access title developed by Pugstorm and published by Fireshine Games. Core Keeper can best be summarized as the result of a night of passion between Stardew Valley and Terraria while Minecraft watched from the shame corner. Don't feel bad for the poor guy, he got to hold the drink tray. Core Keeper is a pixelated open-world exploration game with RPG elements, but it's also so much more. Story: you're a proud, noble explorer who wandered far into the depths of the jungle when you found a shining artifact, an ancient orb. You grabbed it only to discover that the shining relic is not a priceless gemstone, but is in fact a one-way fast pass to an underground labyrinth filled with ruins, fungi, and my downstairs neighbors. It's cold, damp, and the sun hasn't shone here for as long as anyone can remember, just like the 6x5 windowless basement you spent your childhood in.
There's absolutely urine in some of these cups, no doubt.
Much to your surprise, the caverns are actually the remnants of an ancient civilization. As an explorer, you rise to the task of following in the footsteps of your ancestors, expanding and encroaching on the territory of those too weak to stop you. After all, the cavelings can't say you didn't discover these ruins first if there aren't any cavelings. Completing boss-centric milestones in the game lets you venture further into the caverns, leading you on an epic quest to power the core so you can go home. The game isn't finished yet, so we don't actually know if you ever get to leave or not. My headcanon ending for this game is you leave and you come back with your friends. You then bulldoze and flatten every square foot of the caves and turn the entire complex into a Walgreens parking lot, complete with piles of used needles and bum fights. The game doesn't come out and just explain the story to you. You find it out from things like item descriptions, context clues, and a few bits of dialogue from the core. Otherwise, it's up to your imagination to figure out what happened down here, who the core actually is, and why the Viet Cong seem to have issue with you mining their stone. Gameplay: when you start Core Keeper, you'll make a world, then a character. You can customize your character's appearance as well as choose a background for them. There are 7 to choose from, 6 of which give you equipment and stat bonuses. Nomad, on the other hand, exists to let the developers know what percentage of their players know which crayons taste the best. It's the cherry ones, if anyone's curious. You'll spawn in the core room, and that's all the game gives you. You're surrounded on all sides by walls, strange structures, and twisty sideways trees. There are no directions or instructions of what you're supposed to do here. Thankfully, if you're a caveman-brained invalid like me, you'll start smacking every single object in the room until you eventually burst your way through a wall. My favorite part of this setup is you just know someone with a brain smoother than 5,000 thread count sheets starved to death in this goddamn room. Once you get out of the room, you'll begin exploring the dark, uninviting labyrinth of the underground. There, you'll start to meet the locals of the caverns. Slimes, pointy slimes, and copyright-friendly Goombas will all be lurking in the tunnels looking for someone's cheeks to clap. Gang Initiation Day is every day in the mines, and as it turns out, there's a new opening for the role of prison bitch, and the locals would be very interested in seeing your resume. Once you enter the tunnels, the game takes off and just doesn't stop. The first objective will be to find out where the strange shaking is coming from. You'll dig and dig and dig until eventually you'll see it, the very first boss. See, Core Keeper is full of strange creatures who seem to answer to larger, more powerful versions of themselves. Creatures such as the Spooky Jello, the Loopy Boy, and the Forbidden Fleshlight. These bosses carry relics that you can use to power the core in the first room you spawned in. But to get them, you need to defeat the bosses first. So, like any brave adventurer, you take up your copper sword and strike down Glurch the Abominous Mass. You know, after 7 or 8 tries. You see, strapping logs to yourself with masking tape isn't ideal for stopping the crushing weight of a 3-ton organic stress ball. I failed physics in high school, but I'm pretty sure your soft, sunlight, and calcium-deprived body isn't meant to withstand Glurch's attempts at interspecies husbandry. After you try and fail a few times to kill the first boss is usually when you'll discover the importance of this game's greatest asset, the crafting systems. And dear God, are there many of them. Mining and smithing let you make better equipment, while the skills relating to food let you temporarily buff the ever-loving hell out of yourself. Each of these mechanics are tied to a set of skills that level as you use them, even running and vitality. Not only does leveling these skills make them better, but they offer you ability options that let you buff yourself in other ways. Mining can make your melee attacks hit harder, fishing increases your dodge capabilities, and farming gives you tactical defense herpes. All of these skills also translate to max HP when you take the time to level your vitality, meaning a character who shies away from combat can still handle themselves just fine out in the wilderness. Plus, if you want to craft, you'll need materials to craft with. Resource gathering is a huge part of this game and can involve a lot of running around and scouring the map to find the materials you need. at first. Once you remember that you're not some mouth-breathing degenerate, you figure out that electricity is a beautiful thing. Running generators in an enclosed set of caves and caverns is both cool and fun. What are the monsters going to do? Complain about the air quality? Send me a harshly worded cease and desist letter? Building my empire of steel and industry means I get to breathe an unlimited amount of carbon monoxide. You don't have the capacity to worry about pollution when you've whittled your brain cells down to the single digits. When you build your first electronics table, you'll discover that drills and conveyor belts take away the randomness and frustration of mining. After all, you're already in the cave equivalent of Detroit. How much worse could it get if you outsourced all the shitty parts of inventing to robots and engines? Aside from mining, however, you'll have to utilize all the other skills the old-fashioned way. Leveling these abilities can feel like a grind when you go out of your way to raise them, but with how big the world is, you'll often find yourself boosting them organically. See, not only is the world in Core Keeper absolutely massive, it's also completely randomized. The only thing that stays completely consistent is that the core is placed right in the center of the map. That and what types of enemies will spawn in which types of environments. Speaking of environments, let's talk about those. This game is pixelated, yet despite that, it has some absolutely gorgeous backgrounds and areas. You'll start out in dark, dingy tunnels with clay on all sides, but eventually make your way out to underground beaches, lakes, ruins, and even forests and oceans. None of the environments look the same, and they each have their own variety of enemies and loot. The art style in this game works incredibly well and works to make the setting truly come to life. When you have a game that's all about exploration, having a beautiful world to do it in is absolutely crucial, and that's something this game delivers on in spades. The forest area is easily my favorite. It's so pretty, and the lighting effects are a stark contrast to many of the otherwise dark and creepy areas of the map. Honestly, almost all of the areas in this game are just delightful. Almost. Also, the map effects aren't just eye candy. Certain crops can only grow in certain types of soil, which can only be found in certain biomes. Obviously, that means if you want to grow all the crops in the game, you'll have to start farms all across the world, right? What are you, fucking stupid? Core Keeper is an exploration game first and foremost, and I hesitate to call any of its mechanics survival mechanics. Yes, you can starve to death, but it takes a very long time to do so. Food is in such abundance that you go from surviving to thriving in a matter of minutes. Honestly, you can get so caught up in expanding your base and fortifying your walls that you might end up forgetting that you're in the middle of some life or death struggle to claw your way home. Usually, the only enemies you'll see near your base are the ones you've intentionally been spawning in their own private dungeons so that you can force breed them and harvest the resources they drop. Also, let's talk about the combat. Combat in this game is extremely simple but also very satisfying. Your types of weapons are broken into two major categories, melee and ranged. Melee weapons come in a variety of axes, swords, and daggers, while ranged weapons can be anything from bows and slingshots to magic staffs and organic RPGs. When you first start the game, you'll figure out very quickly just how fragile you are. This gets better as time goes on, but until you get your hands on some weapons and armor, your character goes down quicker than your mom at her parole meetings. Once you manage to get some gear, your character's power grows exponentially. Armor doesn't just give you damage resistance, it comes with a built-in variety of stat boosts, such as max HP buffs or even skill bonuses or extra damage with certain weapon types. As it turns out, covering your delicate body with a moldy collection of used handkerchiefs could make the difference between life or death. Weapons operate in a similar fashion, giving you endless options to make a build that works for you. Fighting bosses is easily my favorite part of this game, but it's also the hardest. Taking the time to upgrade your gear is crucial if you want to do more than just respawn at your bed over and over again. The bosses in this game all feel completely different from each other. The slime boss lunges at you in a steady rhythm and tries to stomp you to death, Gorm does loops to try and trample you, and the Hive Mother tosses acid at you while birthing waves of her creepy crawly hellspawn. Video games are fun and relaxing. Fighting a slightly less disgusting version of my Pentecostal distant relatives is not relaxing, it's fucking cathartic. These are the three introductory bosses and can take some serious trial and error to beat. The game will let you brute force your way through them if you want to, but sometimes you're better off using your brain. Is it fair of me to cover every square foot of the boss room with spike traps? No, but I didn't ask to fight a live, birthing, leaking prolapsed anus from Metroid, now did I? Once you get past the Hive Mother, you can move on to the expanded map, where you'll fight jungle versions of the cavelings, mold zombies, and strange plants. This is where you'll start to see the game's difficulty crank up, because now you're training to fight the game's real bosses, the Titans. These are much larger, more powerful enemies with a plethora of abilities to make fighting them a real challenge without having them just be big blocks of health. Each Titan gives you a permanent buff after death, giving you more and more incentive to hunt them down and settle their territories. With better equipment, better skills, and serious abuse of the game's fishing and farming, you'll become an unstoppable killing machine in no time. If you're ever feeling cocky, you can always start a hardcore run in this game. It'll go great. Trust me. Another cool feature about this game are the world systems and the multiplayer. The multiplayer is great.
I hate that.
Put this in your clip.
I hate that.
Touch you.
And the world system lets you port your crazy OP high-level character and drop them, gear and all, into a fresh world. This can be great for finding more resources or for popping into a friend's multiplayer world and helping with difficult boss fights. Having multiplayer means I get to watch hentai and drink bourbon while my wife does all the work, sort of like real life.
Plan on helping me?
No?
Can you help me with this wall? Ow.
The game has a lot of base building elements, but when you get a couple of helping hands, you can take a patch of cave and turn it into a proper fortress with running lights, water, and even entire crop rotations. The game lets you build and customize the world around you as you see fit, even going so far as to let you paint your lamps and change what color your SpongeBob nightlight is. Overall, this game is great, but it is far from flawless. The game is still in early access and is constantly updating, but there are some serious issues I hope they address in the coming months. First and foremost, grinding skills to their required levels for certain things isn't hard, but if you want to really level them up, you're looking at countless hours of grinding. Mining can take forever, but at least there's a chance you'll find loot and resources while you do it. All of the skills related to food, however, can't really be sped up because you'll constantly be waiting. Catching fish, growing crops, cooking meals, they all involve a lot of waiting. Supposedly, the reason mining takes so long to level in this game is because you don't get experience for destroying the wall. You get a point for every time you damage one. The problem with this is that means mining harder and harder walls does not actually benefit you very much, other than the fact that maybe it takes more swings to bring them down. But that means you're breaking or wasting your precious high-level equipment when you could just go to the clay walls and just punch them to death. I don't know if that's accurate, but a lot of the things I've read have said yes, that is the case. If so, that's something that really needs to be addressed. Not to mention how long getting around the caves can take. There's no fast travel system aside from a couple of craftable items, but these aren't great. The cheaper one teleports you back to the core, while the more advanced one works sort of like waypoints. The portals would be fine were it not for the fact that they are extremely resource intensive and you can't really unlock them until late game. Also, for some reason they take 20 minutes to turn on. Without these, going on a mining run for a specific material can take several minutes of doing absolutely nothing but running in a straight line. Building mine carts and railways can help with this, but they can only do so much. Riding in a small, cramped cart in a dark and moldy cavern reminds me a lot of my time in Scotland, except there are slightly less heroin addicts trying to shank me for my drug money. I appreciate the nostalgia, but that's a nightmare I don't need to relive. Also, you can use drills and conveyor belts to move materials from these great big nodes back down to your core, but these are kind of buggy and sometimes the materials will just completely vanish until you walk the entire length of them, then walk back. There's also an issue with one specific biome, the Sunken Sea. That might be surprising to new players because, I mean, look at this place! What is that? What are those? Why is that hand jerking off that stick? It looks really exciting. The problem is, it isn't. This is easily my least favorite part of the game so far. Aside from the Titan that lives there, you really only have 3 enemy types. A slime, this crab, and a tentacle monster that's almost identical to the ones in the mold rooms over in the forest. There's more in the Forlorn Metropolis sub-biome, but these areas are extremely scattered and aren't always easy to find. Honestly, I'd argue that the Metropolis is better than the rest of the biome in nearly every way. It has amazing decorations, the enemies are more interesting, and the loot is just better overall. By comparison, most of the Sunken Sea is just wide open space with nothing but the water beneath you. The land itself is rather bland and all the colors feel washed out. There are a few landmarks of note, but most of them are pretty well hidden and just can be easily missed. If you want to get anywhere in the sea, you'll need a boat, and good ones are not cheap. You can use the crappy one to get around, but then you have to live with the shame of slumming it up in front of the bubble crabs, and they're super judgmental. Plus, you really don't need to make it harder to dodge the shit that the non-consenticles throw at you. But even with those issues, even with the grind, this game is absolutely worth picking up. Right now, it's $12.99 on Steam, and the game is constantly improving. This game has more care and polish as an indie early access title than some AAA titles do now. Also, this game had the fucking audacity to update while I was editing this video. As of yesterday, the new Cozy Caverns update went live. This update lets you place torches on walls, actually use chairs, and go several extra steps in customizing your base in every way possible. If you're a heliophobic cave gremlin like me, this update will be perfect for you. Buy this game. Brew several gallons of performance-enhancing narcotics and drink them recreationally. Then revisit the first boss and let him know this isn't a cave, it's a jar. And he's the Fluttershy figurine. Build a fortress and remind the cave natives that they're not covered by the Geneva Convention. Core Keeper gets a positive review from me, and I highly recommend it. Thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please remember to leave a like and to share this video with your friends. If you want to help support what I do, please consider subscribing or joining my Patreon. I'd also like to give my wife a special thank you for working so hard to make our base for this video look so amazing. You did great, hun. And as always, I'm super appreciative that you let me exploit you for both your time and labor. You truly are my rock. Thank you all again, and I'll see you next time.